What's up, everybody? Welcome back to IGN Game Scoop. I'm your host, Damon Hadfield. I'm joined today by Greg Miller.
Hi.
Colin Moriarty. And Steve Butts.
Hello.
And today's topic, very interesting topic, comes to it from our viewer, James Marsh, who asks, are games getting better? He says, I say yes, but I know a lot of people would say no. Is the industry doing better things today or just different?
How hard do you think James Marsh's life is with a name like Marsh?
Listen,
They could call him
let's not go
Marshmallow.
there.
They could call him and say, go back down to the marshes.
He gets zero sympathy from me on this
Steve
subject,
Butts?
as you well know, right?
Games have been around for, what, 40 years now? Almost 40 years?
Yeah.
Something like that? Yeah. Are they better now than then? Do they get better over time?
Yes. This is the best time to be a gamer.
Whoa.
Done.
Huge.
Period.
Better than 2000.
Now, the problem is in 10 years, I'm going to say that again, too.
Yeah, so maybe you should explain why you say
I think- I mean-
like a big game this year, The Last of Us,
Right.
is better than Super Mario Brothers?
Well, now you're going literally title to title. He was talking about games in general. Are games
Okay,
better?
okay.
Gaming is better right now. It's the best it's ever been. And I compare it to the movie industry, right? The fact that the movie industry, look back at the old silent films before we got the talkies, as they call them. And you look back and you're like, this Charlie Chaplin, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. This isn't good.
Can't hear him anyway.
You compare that to Pacific Rim. Woo!
Do you think movies get better over time?
I think in a lot of ways the movie industry is not plateaued, but they've gotten to what they are. This is what movies are, right? We understand what a movie is and how it's going to be and what that term is and how it exists. Well, I mean, we don't call the motion pictures we watch now talkies anymore, right? There was a big jump there, but we still do all this stuff where there's
Because
like...
the talking was a big deal. Like, oh, they can talk now, so that's what you focus on. I think the issue is we're defining this term better in a couple of different ways. Like technologically, obviously. And I think the movie analogy is perfectly appropriate, right? Like the technology to make movies is considerably better today. And we are now in a position in 2013 where the technology we're using to make games is hundreds, if not thousands of times better than the technology we were using in 1982. My problem with this question is I don't know that the quality of our storytelling or the quality of our experiences is also 100 to 1,000 times better. So I think new technology doesn't necessarily mean a new experience. It just means a new opportunity to screw it up in the same old ways.
Interesting.
Colin, what do you think?
I don't know. I think the potential for games to be better now exists, right? Like, and I think that The Last of Us is a great example of a game that marries really fun, I think, stealth kind of combat gameplay with like a really probably one of the best stories ever told in games, I think, and great voice acting and all that stuff. But when I think about like the archetypical game, like the games that really matter, like think about Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man, right? Like in terms of pure gameplay, in terms of pure fun, like that game is almost unbeatable by most other games, like even though it's really old. Like that game, like that formula, even though it's very simple and static, is just really good as a game. It's not telling you a story really, except for those little things where they're chasing each other around. It's just like you're playing it, right? You're
They
playing
fall
it.
in love and they have
Yeah,
a baby.
act
That's
two.
Miss Pac-Man.
You know,
They meet.
Right.
Like a good example I think of, and I talk about this game every once in a while on Podcast Beyond, is Castlevania 3, which is an NES game, and probably one of the best NES games. Right. And what that game really did for me, which games can't do now, is it really invoked imagination. Games almost give you too much now in some ways, and sometimes you want it, like in The Last of Us, and sometimes you don't. And what I mean by that is, Castlevania 3 had really great core gameplay. It felt like a Castlevania game. Castlevania games are hard and grueling and fun in that sense. But the 8-bit aesthetic kind of invokes something in your imagination where like you're in this castle, you're in this town, you're kind of going through the castle and getting closer to Dracula, but you're using your imagination about what you've seen and where you've been and what you're hearing and kind of putting yourself into that place where the games kind of do that for you now, if that makes any sense. And I feel like my imagination's kind of been ripped out of games as a result of the progress that games have made in terms of technology, but at the same time, I think the potential to make all sorts of great games. I mean, look at Mega Man 9 and 10 when they came out. Those are built on aesthetics and engines from the 80s or whatever, but they're still fun today. You know, so I just think that like there's just more now.
I think there's a certain level of abstraction in those old characters that makes it easier to identify with them, right? Like you look at somebody like Pac-Man, and it's very easy for me to look at Pac-Man and play that character and inhabit it. Whereas I look at somebody like Solid Snake, this photorealistic character who doesn't look at all like me, that's another person. And so there's this extra step I have to go through, this extra effort I have to make to identify with this person and invest myself emotionally in their identity. Would you agree? I mean, Scott McCloud says in his book, Understanding Comics, you know, like the more realistic a face gets, the harder it is to identify with them, which is why cartoons are more popular sometimes with kids, because it's easy for them to lose themselves in that character.
See, you're talking about the fact that, you know, you don't know if storytelling has gone that far, or the emotion connection it has. For me, it has. Like, what I always reference is that, you know, grew up on gaming, loved games, believe it or not. kind of like these video games. And in high school, I remember a distinct thing where I was kind of falling out. I was like looking around, like we were playing goofy games on the N64, and it was like, all right, but this wasn't what I wanted. And then I got a PS1 for a wrestling game, and then I ended up playing Metal Gear Solid, right? And that was the light bulb moment, the lightning strike of like, this is where it's going. That it's going to be able to tell me stories that are going to get me wrapped up and get me lost in what they actually want. I'm totally with you on the fact that you used to play video games and they'd be little sprites and you make up your own story for that person, your own backstory for what they were feeling because they weren't telling you. You were able to do that. But now you look around, I think, and it's the fact that the market is so diverse. The fact that we're in an industry where no matter what you feel like playing, you can find that game right now and go get it. I think that's really powerful. And I think the fact that there can be a game like The Walking Dead, Telltale's, where it is, I just want to have this adventure game, but really all it is a conversation simulator. You know what I mean? Like, it's not really at any point am I like, oh, what am I going to do? Like, yeah, it's like you get that moment and you have to decide and then try to weigh that, okay, well, now they're mad at me. How does that play? I think that's really cool and really empowering.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think the presentation in something like Walking Dead is great, and it makes it okay that the mechanics in that game aren't so hot.
Right.
You don't care
And see, that's when we start getting down to, right, is, like you said, is game X better than Super Mario? And it's like, that's when it starts to get to, like, Super Mario Brothers controls so well and plays so well, and it's so much fun to run through and go through. But then again, there's something like Journey, right, where it is left to your interpretation of, I'm this thing. I'm a carpet man out in the desert, and what does all this mean? What's my journey?
But yeah, the player is sort of asked to participate more in sort of building an emotional or narrative context for that story. And I feel like sometimes when we get to this point where photorealism is kind of held up as this ideal goal for every game, we lose some of that because to me at a certain point that becomes distracting, and maybe I'm not having as much fun participating in the mechanics and building in my own imagination the cool context, like I would with like you look at the older version of The Sims on PC, right? The graphics are really low tech, but because of my interaction with it, I fill in the blanks myself, and you don't do that as much with the new one, where it's like, oh, look at all the expressions our characters have. It's like I don't care, like.
I'm
You're
totally
missing
with
the point of the game for me.
For me in SimCity 2000,
Yeah.
I made up, what was happening, and I totally was the mayor, and I, blah, 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 blah. And then you play the new one, right, and it is like you click on a person, and it tells you where they're going and what's happening, and like, that's awesome. That's awesome technologically wise, but like, I'd love to sit back sometimes and just get lost in that old feeling.
And maybe there's an analog there with like the idea that a horror movie can sometimes be scarier by not showing you the thing,
I wonder if our game's getting better is the wrong question. Because I would argue that ultimately any game is only judged by how much fun it is, right? That's why we play them. No matter how good the graphics are or how innovative the online features are, they're supposed to be fun and enjoyable. So is the question, are games getting more fun? Are games more fun today?
Yeah, I mean that could be the question. I mean, and in that sense, like I think games are more immersive now, and like we've been saying, like more of an experience. Like Fallout 3 is a great example, right? Or New Vegas, like. You walk out of the vault into this world, and you just do whatever you want, right? For as long as you really want to do it. And there's quests and side quests and people to meet and monsters to kill and stuff. But like you're in this world with like parameters, and you just do whatever you want. And games have always been that, but they've just been presented in different ways. And really, when I think about games as gameplay, like when gameplay is king, I always say that. Like when we harken back to the days when there was no excuses for a game not playing well, because there was nothing around it to kind of make it better. Like Fallout 3 doesn't play exceptionally well, right? I mean, there's a system in there, VATS, that is designed specifically because the shooting is not good, right? You couldn't make that excuse back with Ninja Gaiden on NES. Like when I picked that game up and I played, I'm like, God damn, this game is good. Yeah. This game is still really, really good and really hard. But we kind of dismiss it. First of all, there's a whole generation of people below us now that like have never even experienced these games. They don't have that kind of context. And second of all, I think what playing a game means is just different now because it's more of an experience. Like when I jump into Skyrim or something like that, like you're like, I'm going to spend 100 hours with this game. If you spend 100 hours in Ninja Gaiden and you're really good at it, you're going to play the game 100 times. You know what I mean? And so
you're not even going to be close in Skyrim with 100 hours.
No, exactly. and so like I just think games are different. I keep going back like Arkanoid or Pac-Man or like these games that are just, in terms of pure gameplay, are just fun. Mario's a great example too, especially Mario 3 or Super Mario World. Like those games in terms of feel, in terms of platforming, in terms of just gameplay and just fun factor, like those games are hard to beat still today. There's very few games where even the games I really have a soft spot for, like really actiony games like Vanquish or something, no, that game's not as good as Mario. Of course not.
It's funny because I feel like a lot of those old games, the context came through the mechanics. even a game like Madden or whatever, like the whole story, the whole narrative, the whole emotional side of that game is just the rules of the game that you engage with, right? And I feel like a lot of those haven't changed, but what we've done is we've built on these layers of added presentation, where like, oh, it looks super gritty, and like look at all these little details, and there's a little tiny like piece of paper on this desk over here, and isn't that interesting that I can go look at that? Or Lee says, I don't need to use that right now. And it's like, that's cool that
Carly
the character
will remember that.
takes note of that. But I don't know that I'm as engaged in that. And so I feel like where games have gotten better is when we've gotten away from this idea of genre-based development, where it's like, I want to make a shooter, or I want to make an MMO, or I want to make a strategy game. Because back in the day, it used to be, I want to make a game about a pirate, or I want to make a game where I'm a city planner, and like the wish fulfillment was the motivating factor for creating the gameplay, and because of that, the gameplay created the context for that wish fulfillment. And I feel like we're getting back to that now with games like the Batman Arkham games or Red Dead, where it's like, we're not really hung up on the genre classification. What we want to do is make a cool cowboy simulator or a cool Batman simulator.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that sense, I feel like games have gotten better, but that's a clear case where the gameplay mechanics are in line with what they're trying to do narratively or emotionally with the game.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with the point specifically that, I guess what we're beating around the bush in a sense is games started with gameplay, right? Like there was just the game to play. Like when you think about the oscilloscope games that they used to make, like at like National Laboratories in the 50s.
I remember
60s.
them well, yeah.
Well, like those were really the first games, and like there was no story. It was like, this is an oscilloscope, and like we're gonna have a ball bouncing around and stuff. And then like Pong was just like, I'm gonna bounce a ball back and forth. And we saw this slow evolution of games being able to do more than just play them. Like by the time we even got to a game like Castlevania 3, like there was story in that game. There's a whole intro sequence, and it sets the stage and stuff. And now we jump forward to a game like The Last of Us, which is unparalleled in terms of presentation value in this industry. Nothing's ever been like that. Nothing's ever been that good in terms of presentation before. Mm-hmm. And so I think what we're like, the gameplay is kind of getting buried underneath everything else. And what you have to kind of discover is is there gameplay there that you like that's worth kind of getting around everything else, or are you there for other reasons, like you are with Fallout? Because I certainly wasn't in Fallout 3 for the gameplay. I got to be honest with you. I was there because like this is awesome and it's a story and there's an environment for me to explore. I'm not there for the gameplay, and so I think the question is a little misleading in the sense that we're looking for different things now. And the good news about the industry today is that you can have basically everything you want, and it's just only going to get better.
That's the thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you guys that it just kind of gets better and better to be a gamer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that video games themselves are getting better any more than I would say that music is better. Like who could argue that music is, today's music is better than Bach or Beethoven or Mozart, right? But it's different, and we don't lose anything that came before, right? So everything just gets better and better. Yep. It's a very interesting topic.
It is.
Thank you for suggesting it, James Marsh. Viewers, if you have your own questions, you can always reach us at gamescoop@ign.com. Stay tuned for more video game discussions right here on GameScoop.
The Marsh Man, they call him. Living in the marsh, eating the marshmallows. What do you know, James? Nerd.